Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Easton-Calabria, and I'm a senior research officer at the Refugee Studies Center. And I have had the pleasure this term of convening the seminar series on localizing refugee research and practice. And today I have the great pleasure to introduce Michelle Lokot, who's a research fellow at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and Gang Karume, a technical advisor for the organization Rebuild Hope for Africa, who's calling in today from Bukavu, DRC. So before I hand it over to them, just a brief bit of housekeeping. You'll see that the chat function is turned off, but the Q&A function is ready and waiting for you. So at any point during the talk after, please feel free to write in questions and I'll be answering them. No, I'll be asking them for Michelle and Gang to answer. I promise I won't answer any. And please be succinct if possible in your questions. You can feel free to add on extra information, but that is helpful as I've been tested with my multitasking this term. So I will now turn off my camera and video and hand it over to you, Michelle and Gang.
Great, thank you, Evan. And thank you also to the Refugee Studies Center for the opportunity to present our research on co-production and to reflect a little bit together on the value of co-producing research in humanitarian settings. So today, the seminar is based on research that was jointly conducted by myself and my colleague, Dr. Caitlin Wake at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, where we interviewed 32 participants, practitioners and academics from multiple geographical regions. And these individuals had co-produced research or been involved in some form of NGO academia research partnership. And so based on that research, we produced a practice guide on co-production, which is designed to help academics and NGOs who are thinking about co-producing research. That's available online, and I can also share it in the chat box. I'm co-presenting today with Gang Karume, who was one of the participants in this research, and he shared quite a lot of insights, which he's going to discuss today based on his experiences, especially working in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And we both reflect a little bit on our experiences conducting research in humanitarian settings in today's seminar. So we'll start off by talking about some of the problems and the challenges associated with NGO academia research partnerships, and then look a little bit at how co-production might be a way of addressing some of these challenges and outline 7 principles from our research on co-production, and then also reflect a little bit at the end on what it means to actually operationalize co-production in humanitarian settings. We've included quite a lot of quotes from participants who were interviewed as part of this research to help illustrate the challenges, the complexities that they experience, and we hope these will be useful in providing insight to some of these experiences in co-production. And then we are looking forward also to discussing any of your questions and your reflections as well at the end. So I'll pass on to Gang now.
Thanks, Michelle, for the introduction. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody who is listening to us. I'm really pleased to share some of my experience and opinions on co-production. I'm mainly going to focus on challenges that are linked to co-production, and I would say, please don't hesitate to share questions, concerns, and we'll deal with those later on. And I expect that they'll be coming in. Challenges that I would talk about now is mainly regarding first the co-producing partners or the co-producing actors. I used to say there always is on the one hand someone who needs something. The person needs a degree, needs money, needs to develop an advocacy tool, need to inform a larger public on any given issue, discover the truth, bring another side of the story, etc., etc. There is always someone who needs something on the one hand. And on the other hand, there is always someone from whom that something needs to come from. And mostly that person does not have anything clearly pre-expected. Instead, you are going to realize that the person has the goodwill in putting in his or her time, his or her knowledge, and sometimes even his own personal resources. Now, the problem for me, the challenge starts when you need something and you come with the rules and the agenda to obtain it. You come with the protocols, you come with timeline, you come with payment rates, you come with the profile of collaborators, and even expected results ahead of time. And you ignore, you completely ignore sometimes that the person from whom you need information knows the context. The person might not have an academic degree, but has sufficient knowledge. That's actually the reason why you are coming to that person. The person has a lot of knowledge that is undocumented, and maybe that you are trying to document throughout the contact, the co-production process you are creating. You forget that that person, before you came in, the person had his own priorities, and now you want to shift over the agenda to make of your priorities his or her priorities. You may look at the person per your standard, the person looks poor, but indeed the person is even richer than you are, than you expect the person is. For me, this is a really, really major challenge. When you come to someone with this already in your mind, in your books, in your computer, then you will have problems to advance. You will have problems to co-produce. So one of the quotes in the book says that the research, as usual, reinforces the idea that communities are merely sources of data. Practitioners and academics raise a number of issues related to research fatigue, lack of follow-up through after data collection and repetitive assessments. That is true. But the whole thing is, the question for me is, do really practitioners and academics put themselves in each other's shoes? As a researcher, do you take time to reflect, guess if I was the academic? And at the opposite, as an academic, do you happen to ask yourself, if I was a practitioner, until that questioning takes place, I think there'll be very little we can achieve together. But if I was a practitioner, would I be comfortable co-producing with this researcher? If you ask yourself that question, is what the researcher putting on my table fair and reasonable for the suggested co-production work and the amount of work that the person expects from me? Is what I'm suggested to the practitioner good enough that if I was myself, the person, could I take it? The offer that they bring you to my table, could I take it? Is my research, and it's anyone who would be part of it. If every side, if it's that takes time to reflect on this question around, we can try to sort out before even we start, because co-production becomes complicated when you don't think about these things beforehand. Among the quotes that the quotes that the book is raising, they're saying, within traditional approaches, certain kind of knowledge are given more value. Western knowledge over other kinds of knowledge, academic knowledge over NGO knowledge, and etc. But and me, I'm putting the question. I just reflect on that and say, how would someone 1 week research in a field, how that week research would make him more experienced or more intelligent on a topic, someone living within the context? Someone living within the given context, you could get more knowledge in 1 week. 1 week just field ground. When we are talking, for example, about epidemics, when you're talking about natural disasters or conflict, when you get in a place like the Thailand, the Philippines, you come for 1 week research and you pretend that you have more knowledge than someone who lives with typhoons every day, who lives with inundations every day. If you ask yourself that question, then you'd be modest and saying Western knowledge vs academic knowledge vs NGO knowledge. You'd be modest if you ask yourself that question. And the quotes and the book talks about power dynamics. The power dynamics for me, I think people they don't look at that, they don't reflect on that because they are willingly or unwillingly formatted. You are coming, I'm sorry, it's not you. Sorry, sorry if I'm just taking an example. Sorry, Michelle, I'm just taking you from the London school. You are coming and saying, okay, this is how us at London School of Tropical Medicine, this is how we conduct research. You are already formatted. And me, when I'm receiving you in a co-production work, I just put in my mind, she's coming from London School of Tropical Medicine. They must have a protocol to conduct research. I have to abide of that. I'm formatted. I'm already formatted, willingly or unwillingly. And I must say, practitioners and academics, they need to put themselves in each other's shoes. I repeat that again, I've said it again. There will be very little to change in the relationship if you don't consider each one's, the other side view, the other side behavior, the other side feeling, willing, the other side expectation. I don't think we can move further on that. This is difficult, but we have to reflect on that. And for me, that is the whole value that Kathleen and Michelle research has brought in. This is the whole value that they've brought in. It's this really, as they said, it is. I would call the book it's a vademecum. Someone who goes for co-production should have that in the pocket and read it at each time of the process. We talk about the decision making, about how the research will occur. They say that one of the quotes says, decision making about how the research will occur, decision making or lack of transparent decision making. And from my experience and my knowledge, I would say yes, but because if the entire decision making process is displayed, sometimes part of full agenda of the research and there is expected results may be screwed up. If you come, you display, for example, the entire process, then you realize, if I display the entire process, then I will need to get a local ethical review. And that will take more time than I have. It will take me more resources than I have. Then I'll have to pay more money. I don't have that. And it's not in the protocol. Then the research will take more time than I expected. And I'll be late for my graduation and whatever. Then the practitioner will set his bar higher because he knows now what the entire decision-making process is. He's going to set the bar higher when discussing co-production. Then the protocol may need revision while it came from school, the doctor somewhere or your professor somewhere in London or in the United States. Then you have to revert back to the professor to change the protocol. And for me, you just come, okay, when you realize all those challenges that may come in displaying the decision-making process, then you choose to go with the shortcut, the hierarchical decision-making. That's a shortcut, but that's not the way it should happen in co-production. We have to be clear and transparent all along. And that's the reason why you don't come with something that is pre-cooked, because the other, it may not fit the appetite of the other. We also talk about the capacity that needs to be increased on the side of local partners. And I said, no, I didn't agree with that quote actually, because when you're talking about capacity, it should be viewed as something to be increased on both sides. Because when you come in co-production, you lack something that you lack me to bring in. And sometimes even the other person does not have anything he's expecting. And I was taking an example. I've taken an example that if you have a 20-year-old son or daughter in your house, and she's still or he's still not yet capable of arranging his bedroom, he's not capable of cleaning the house, not capable of washing the dish, then there is a serious problem. And the problem is to be looked at both sides. It's either you as a parent, you are a bad educator. You have raised your child as a lazy person, as a useless child to the society and to the house. That is the side of you as a parent. Or then your daughter or your son may be mentally affected, because to not be able to arrange your bed at 20 years old, it raises a question. It raises a question. And now, question to, I don't know, I'm just asking a question to the audience because I did not get any answer to that. How long have international partners been operating with local actors to pretend they are still yet not capable of carrying out the research on their own? Don't we know of local actors who have produced useful research papers on their own? Don't we know of them? Of course, they do exist. To say that it's only local partners that need capacity building, I think that is really a wrong reading of the situation in co-production. I'm going to maybe reflect on two other quotes before I could hand over to Michelle. It's the benefit from research. The benefit from research, someone who's coming in a co-production most of the time is maybe expecting only an academic paper. But for me, the academic paper should not be the only output. We should look raising at each other's profile. That's a win-win partnership. But at the end of co-production, our voices should be both equally heard. Our influence in our respective audiences should equally grow. Our research capabilities should equally be augmented. And the resources we've originally brought in should equally be perceived as equal and of the same value. And that's what actually humanitarian actors are currently calling your localization. And lastly, the challenges for NGOs and other partners, including tight time frames and research processes. For example, the requirement to receive ethical approval, which can take a long time. I've already said it. You don't come and expect that your timeline will be respected by everybody. Come with a timeline that considers that things can change and can drastically change. You're expecting a 2 weeks research. You may ending up making a 6 months research if you really want to co-produce. And the only reason why that happens is because most of the time we did not equally consider the partner at the onset of the research. Here again, it's the formatting disease that reappears. And I've already said it. The formatting disease is really very dangerous on co-production. Let me stop on this and maybe hand over to Michelle. I expect maybe I assume there are some questions that will be already coming from this. Thank you.
Thank you, Gang. I think providing some really useful framing, some important and also quite provocative questions for us to think about when we think about power, when we think about research partnerships, and then when we use co-production. So I wanted to briefly sort of outline what it is we mean when we're talking about co-production and some of the principles that we found in our research. And just a little bit of the history. So co-production emerged out of this recognition that there was a need for more horizontal partnerships between the public sector and communities, and that this would improve the delivery of goods and services. And so co-production has been associated with this idea of creating more participatory, more equitable processes so that the needs of service users can be heard and acted upon. And really central to co-production is this idea of sharing power and having this equitable partnership. Co-production has been used a lot in the health sector and has also spread to other sectors, including the humanitarian and development sectors. And there are lots of definitions of co-production, but we, as part of our research, created our definition of co-production in research. And you'll see this in our practice guide, but we say co-production in research refers to this horizontal partnership. It's between researchers who might be academic or non-academic, as well as active research participants to undertake research that informs action. And then here we go into our 7 principles. So co-produced research, it's tackling unequal power dynamics, it's challenging the way that knowledge is produced, it's ensuring more equitable partnerships and sharing of decision-making, reciprocity, mutual capacity strengthening, greater reflexivity, and then also more flexible ways of interacting and working across the research cycle. And I think one of the really interesting things that we found in our research is that the term co-production is often misused or misunderstood and sometimes conflated with other terms like collaboration, being consultative, being participatory, or co-creating. And I think similar to how other buzzwords emerge in humanitarian discourse and they sort of become part of the day-to-day language that is used, but without maybe recognition of what this actually involves. So at times, the language of co-production is used in what we might say is a performative way. So there's so much increase on a focus on localization, on decolonizing development and aid. And so using co-production might also become a way of signaling that, you know, I'm using this sort of in vogue term, but without it necessarily being meaningful and resulting in tangible changes to research. At times, relationships that are more like subcontracting relationships might have this label of co-production attached to them. And a common example in our research was where an academic institute or international NGO might contract a local organization to collect data. And this academic institute or INGO, they would determine the scope of the research, they would draft the research questions, the data collection tools, they might ask the local actor to contextualize the tools, but then the local actor is the one that's responsible for collecting the data. Often the local actor is not involved in the analysis, but the data would get sent back and this international actor would be responsible for analyzing and then publishing reports and papers based on this. And this is what we would call subcontracting rather than co-production. In co-production, instead, you would see all the stakeholders involved, like Gang said, from the inception of the project throughout the research process and having this equal stake in and sharing decision-making and power throughout. And so I think really important just to recognize that co-production is different to some of the other language that is often linked to it. And it has the center of it, I think, this idea of addressing unequal power dynamics during research. Also, I think important to note is that co-production is not necessarily an outcome, but something that is more about a process. It's a process that occurs on a spectrum. So it's not necessarily possible to achieve co-production, but you might take incremental steps within a project to try and realize some of the principles of co-production. So with that sort of very brief intro, I wanted to briefly talk through the 7 principles that are part of this definition that we developed. And you'll see that these are not necessarily new to research practice. A few of these principles that we talk through are actually quite common and encouraged in other disciplines. So co-production doesn't draw on just a few of them, but it draws on several disciplines from several principles from different disciplines, and it really centers these around shifting power. So the first principle is around tackling unequal power dynamics, which Gang has spoken to quite a lot. And here it's recognizing that co-production requires explicitly examining and then also shifting who is holding power and how are they using it during the research cycle. And this starts from the inception of the project, from the way the budget is allocated, the way the research scope is designed, the topic, guides, the fieldwork, then the analysis and publication. And here, I'll just share a quote here from a researcher from Europe. And she said, we need to sit down with people and say, right, here's the budget. How do we split it between us? How do we share this? So having those conversations. And then what are the power imbalances in this potential research team that we're beginning to convene? How do we address these? And she talks about race, about gender, homophobia, about childcare, and really trying to make these power hierarchies a bit more practical. And a lot of the participants we talked to in our research shared sort of their practical strategies that they use in co-produced research to try and address power hierarchies, because it can sound like a very sort of vague and ethereal concept, but really trying to break it down into what does this look like in a group meeting. So one person shared that if they find that certain people are dominating these discussions when they're planning the research and making decisions, that they'd split up into smaller discussion groups to discuss and make decisions. In some settings, this might mean having women in a separate group, a separate space to voice their opinions about the research direction or break down the gender dynamics. Or it might mean separating out the managers, the supervisors, the principal investigators, who the rest of the group might ordinarily defer to. And this is a way of ensuring that other perspectives are also heard. They also talked about other ways of gathering people's ideas on what research should look like. And that doesn't have to be in a group meeting. It could be in smaller meetings. It could be via emails or other kind of approaches of sharing ideas. They also said that they often have meetings where they agree that no one should use their titles, so not doctor this, doctor that, but everyone is just on a first name basis. One person shared that she asks people who do not hold positions of power to share their ideas first. And so this is a way of really intentionally trying to break down this tendency that's really common in research partnerships, where we defer to sort of the more prestigious organization or the more experienced, what might be seen to be the most experienced, or the person who's holding the budget. So really trying to address some of those entrenched issues. And then I think challenging power dynamics also means a shift in determining the research topic itself, so that it might be less about what a donor is interested in or what an NGO needs evidence about, but it's actually something relevant and needed for communities, for refugee populations, for displaced populations themselves. And so one practitioner from Africa, she says, taking the idea of what does the community actually need takes longer, but it can be more transformative in the long run. The second principle is about challenging knowledge production hierarchies. And here, again, it means challenging this idea that this expert outsider that Gang spoke about has the knowledge. It means recognizing knowledge held by others, valuing not just the scientific over the experiential, but really placing value in people who are affected by crisis as the experts of their own experiences and communities. The third principle is around ensuring more equitable partnerships and shared decision making. And this really highlights how decisions about funding, the scope of the research, about capacity might often be one-sided. And when we try to work more equitably and share power and decision making, it means a change to research as normal. So a few quotes to share here. One academic said, the main thing is to involve them from the beginning. No one would be happy to be on the receiving end of something that is already prepared and designed. And a practitioner from the Middle East, he said, we don't want to be data collectors for your research. We want to be as a researcher with you, to collaborate with you, not just take us because we are in the field. And in our interviews with practitioners, there was a lot of pushback on this idea of just bringing in a local partner to collect data when they haven't been involved in shaping the research questions or developing the tools. The fourth principle is around reciprocity, which is we define as an exchange of time and knowledge and participation. And this is important because it makes sure that all stakeholders who are part of that partnership feel that they're not only giving, but they're able to get something out of the process. So one researcher commented, if people are contributing to research, they should be appropriately rewarded. They shouldn't be expected to do it just out of their own goodwill in their own free time for the benefit of some imaginary future population. And here, I think building in processes where everyone gets something back. It could be financial benefits in how a budget is allocated. It could be compensating people for the time that they've invested into the co-production process. And it could also be things like sharing authorship or co-presenting findings. The fifth principle is around capacity building or capacity strengthening. And it's really challenging this idea that Gang also spoke to, of this expert from somewhere else coming to build the capacity of those that we say are in the field. And so co-production really promotes this idea of mutual capacity strengthening. So here, this practitioner, this researcher says we need to think about having our own capacity strengthened, not about how we might strengthen the capacity of communities or individuals or partners, because again, that's the paternalistic model I would like us to see us move away from. It's mutual, not one-way traffic. And then the sixth principle is about reflexivity. And this is about thinking about our background, our culture, our identity, which we refer to as positionality, and how our perspectives might shape the research process. And I think here recognizing that research is not a neutral or objective process, but we all bring our own agenda, our values, our worldview. And we also bring the values and the agenda and the worldview of our institutions that we're part of. And so recognizing that is really important when you're trying to unravel those power dynamics. And then the last principle is around being flexible, as the process of co-production means learning, it means evolving. And so it does require flexibility in how different stakeholders work together. Often the timeframes of academic institutes or NGOs might be different to a local one. Budget cycles might be different. It might require flexibility and adapting to how other organizations work. It might also mean adjusting to the timeframes of others, being flexible with budgets, having a sort of a willing and flexible donor is really important, and being open to different ways of working and less hierarchical meeting structures. So I'm going to pass on back to Gang now, and he's going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges operationalizing co-production.
Thanks, Michelle. I've already been. Am I on mute? No, let me check.
We can hear you.
I've already, I've already tried to bring to share you some of the experiences on the difficulties that I've seen, I've experienced as a national organization worker, and also as one with experience in co-producing. I'm not going back to the details, but I wanted just to close up my intervention, but like bringing a similar situation we are talking, similar to co-production challenges, but this time with the development of project proposals between international organizations and national organizations. And this is a case that is actually happening in Eastern DRC. And the case is about the humanitarian the DRC Humanitarian Fund has launched a call for proposals. And they strongly encourage international NGOs to in consortium to develop those project proposals. And one international organization contacted us and another national organization. Us, as Rebuild Up for Africa, we are a national organization. The international organizations got in touch with us, and another national organization say, look guys, can we go together and develop a project proposal for the DRC Humanitarian Fund? They say, okay, fine. That's great, that's cool. And then the area where the proposals, the project proposals, the area where it will be implemented, that international organization has never been there, but they want to become the lead of the consortium. And as you just say, no, you cannot lead us. That's you are kind of blind. How are you going to lead us being active in those areas over decades, and you have never been there and you want to become a lead? And all of a sudden, the language and the vocabulary changed. They said, we are no longer talking about consortium, then we are going to talk about partnership. It means that its own proposal And it's going to indicate in its proposal that we'll be collaborating with this given organization, that is our organization and the other national organization. It means just before, because they cannot be the lead, they don't accept the word consortium and they talk about the word partnership. And even if in partnership, it doesn't work that way. I just wanted to flag out that mentality. That mentality is not only in the field of research. It's not only in the field of in the academic field. It is also in the humanitarian field. That mentality of that only international organization can lead is predominant, and no one is ready to challenge it. And there are very few, like in co-production. It's thanks to this job that Michelle and Kelly have produced that we now realize, wow, we have to question this. We have to challenge some of the behaviors. And this is what actually they are echoing more and more within the humanitarian world. We are echoing as institutional racism. Challenges that we've raised with co-production are really faced in other sectors where people come together in the objective of coming to one common objective. And it is really more crying in the humanitarian sector. The system itself for the moment does not allow us to really talk about co-producing. But I think the discussions this handbook that has been generated and these discussions that we are taking are really very useful and very helpful for us to look at things otherwise and maybe give us a chance to better produce and leave no one frustrated in the joint adventure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gang. And just as we sort of wrap up and open up for questions and reflections from all of you, I think also thinking about some of these difficult questions of what does it actually mean to address power dynamics. I think it's quite difficult in practice. We're not always aware of the power dynamics that may be operating, and we can miss power dynamics that intersect with each other. So, for example, intersections between gender and class, and power can also be not always so easy to unravel. So I think it's important we don't also take a simplistic approach to addressing unequal power. I want to share a couple of quotes around this. So this quote from an academic in Africa, and he said, by saying we co-produce this with refugees, with trans women, or whoever your group is, you hide the fact it's still you who might be setting the agenda. It's still you who brings the resources and maybe controls how it's disseminated. So tackling power doesn't mean just outsourcing work to communities who are previously marginalized or excluded from research processes, but it actually means going further, engaging these groups from the outset to set the research agenda and then make decisions together about how the research will occur. And then I think the second quote here, researchers think they can get past these problems of research fatigue by recruiting refugees to work on their team, but that is not solving the problem. It's just a band-aid. You're using refugees to promote your research or to make your research look good. And here I think it's really emphasizing how co-production has to go beyond being merely performative, and recognizing also that there are multiple layers of power hierarchies. It's not always maybe the academic institute or the international organization who might hold power. At times, it might even be local organizations who are quite powerful. And then there are power hierarchies between the local organizations and the communities they work in. People working in local organizations might represent an educated elite in that setting. They might not always understand sort of the real issues faced by communities or displaced populations. And so I think coming back to this idea that before we try to address these power hierarchies, we need to understand them. We can't always completely eliminate their impact, but just being aware of them is an important starting point and is really a critical part of that co-production process. I'm going to leave it there and hand back to Evan.
Great, thank you both so much for a wonderful presentation.